love it. I love it. That's so good. Hello world, and welcome to my channel, where I share my writing journey, talk about books, and even, on occasion, shake things up. In this week's video, I am happy to declare that I have finally selected my top 10 favorite opening lines and least favorite opening lines to hit the shelves this February in the paranormal romance genre. Let me tell you, this month had it all, so let's just sit back, relax, and enjoy our time together, because, whew, You'll see what I mean in a minute. Before we dive in, please note that this list is intended for entertainment purposes only, and if it helps you craft your own opening lines, then that's great. That being said, if you happen to have authored one of the books whose opening lines made my list of the top 10 worst opening lines, please don't take it to heart. You're not a bad writer just because I didn't happen to enjoy your particular choice of opening line. The quality of a book's beginning, much like the quality of the entire book, is a subjective experience, and the opinions presented here are just that, my own opinions. Please take them with a grain of salt. Additionally, I am happy to announce that my friend and fellow paranormal romance author Maria Warren just released her book Alpha's Fake Wife, a reverse harem paranormal romance, and it's available right now on Amazon. This steamy, slow-to-burn read may have just hit the shelves, but it has already taken off to number 215 in werewolf romance, and it's showing no sign of slowing down. So, by all means, if you like steamy, reverse harem, wolf shifter romance, check it out in the link provided below, because this has your name written all over it. And lastly, if you enjoy my work and would like to support it, please smash that like button, leave a comment below, subscribe to my channel, and ring that bell. I post new videos every Wednesday, and I would be honored if you would come along with me on my journey to make my writing dreams a reality. Now let's do this. Starting with my favorite lines from this month, we have, coming in at number 10, Beautiful Madness, an urban fantasy wolf shifter series, Kate Silver Book 5, by Laken Crane. The elders didn't punish me for letting the serial killer, Sam Keller, go. As a matter of fact, they barely spoke of it at all, and that was because they believed I'd made a mistake I would soon rectify. Apparently, they were always one step ahead of me. They bided their time, waiting for what they thought was coming. It made me nervous, and I continued wearing the bracelet they gave me, just in case. I liked this opening line because it immediately laid the groundwork for suspense. The fact that she let a serial killer go is rather intriguing. I wonder what downstream consequences that will have. I mean, he was a serial killer after all, right? And then we know that there are elders in the position to punish people, as well as a bracelet that she's wearing, which apparently seems to mitigate some sort of concern of hers that we're not yet clear on. This line may not have been specifically paranormal romance, but it definitely did pique my interest, and it gave me the hint that there's definitely magic going on of some sort. I think it was the elders part that clued me in, as well as the bracelet, unless the bracelet is some sort of, high-tech technology, but this isn't a sci-fi book, so it's not going to be. Nice suspense, somewhat genre-specific, and I would read more. Nicely done. Next up, coming in at number 9, we have Burn for Her, the Reflections series, Book 1 by Brianna Michaels. Nearly 300 years ago, thunder cracked and lightning shredded the sky as the boy staggered through the woods, bloody and broken. Wheezing, he pressed his trembling hand against the most painful of his many wounds. Blood flowed freely from between his fingers. His lungs ached, caught between frozen and burning. A fresh wave of panic and terror propelled him forward. Unbalanced, his bare feet slipped in mud, causing him to slide down a small ravine and crash into the river. Once again, we have an opening line that lays a great groundwork for danger, suspense, intrigue. I enjoyed the sense of mystery surrounding this opening line. The raging storm, the wounds that we don't yet know an explanation to, the urgency of the fact that he's running in and of itself. This line definitely made me want to read more, even if it didn't clue me in that it was specifically paranormal romance. It was unique, and it caught my attention, and that's enough for me. Coming in at number 8, we have Fighting Monsters, Part 1, A Monster Romance by Sam Hall. "That's my brave girl," Rune said, kissing me once, soft and almost chastely. "We didn't want to do this, not until you were back on your land with your green man to pick up the pieces, because I can't stay now. You're too drained for this, but I'm here, love, always here." And he put his hand over my heart, right as he faded away, leaving me staring out into the sea. I really liked this opening line. Not only was it genre specific, I could tell right away that this was not just a romance, but a paranormal romance, but it was sweet, and it was also bittersweet. He gives her an almost chaste kiss, so not quite innocent, and then he fades away. We don't know why, we don't know what's going on, but I would definitely love to read on and find out more. I found this opening to be rather poetic, and not gonna lie, I'm a bit of a sucker for all things related to the ocean as well. I enjoyed the bittersweet, poetic, suspenseful, and genre-specific nature of this opening. Nicely done. Coming in at number 7, we have Dark Hunter's Boone, The Children of the Gods, Paranormal Romance, Book 58, by I.T. Lucas. Elena, eldest daughter of the goddess Anani, mother of 13, grandmother of 17, great-grandmother of 23, and a great many times over grandmother of nearly every member of Anani's clan, sat in front of the vanity and gazed at her lover's reflection in the mirror. It had been one of those days that would forever remain etched in her memory, and it wasn't over yet. In the span of 12 hours, their team had been trapped under the ruins of an ancient outpost, had found a hybrid Craw-El female who'd been hiding there for years, and after they'd returned to the hotel, Elena had finally admitted to Orion that she'd fallen in love with him and proclaimed him her mate. At first, this opening line had thrown me off a bit because of the long title of this person's name. On the other hand, it did give me an impression that this book probably has some strong fantasy elements going on, which is a good thing to let readers know right out of the gate, because fantasy isn't everyone's thing. We also know that this is paranormal romance because, as she says, Elena had finally admitted to Orion that she'd fallen in love with him and proclaimed him her mate. Okay, so we've got mates going on. Seals the deal there. And the fact that this day is so monumental to her that she's never going to forget about it, ever. It's forever etched in her memory and it's not going anywhere. That makes me want to know more about what's going on with this story. What happened? What made this day so special or so terrible? Nicely done, I.T. Lucas. In 6th place, we have Rancher Dragon's Unexpected Mate, a Midlife Dragon Shifter romance, Banished Midlife Dragon Shifters series, by Alicia Banks. Vinia Hale stood with her head held high before the entire community, with her infant daughter in her arms and her 4 sons standing at her side. Her youngest son, Drake, had tears running down his face. Colton, her eldest, held Drake's hand and tried to comfort him, even though Vinay could see his jaw clench time and time again as he listened to the proceedings. She knew he was hurting as horribly as she herself, but at the moment she had no ability to do anything about it. The entire situation had gotten completely out of control, and at this point she was fighting for her own life and those of her children. Wow. This one struck home with me because I have children, so the idea of being in a position to fight for their lives is automatically a very, very resonant chord to strike. I definitely get the feeling of desperation from this opening, suspense, and this beginning gives me a feeling that you're not necessarily guaranteed that everything's going to work out okay. I found myself rooting for the heroine of the story very early on, and that's something that I enjoy when I read. I want the protagonist to succeed, and if I can feel that from the very first paragraph, I know that the author did their job here. So, well done. In 5th place, we have Midlife Witch Hunter, the 40 Proof Series, Book 6, by Shannon Mayer. I left Bree there, at the fort, gathered up my army and left her, because I could not bear to see the hurt in her beautiful eyes. Hurt that I'd caused, because I was bound to the Dark Council. I didn't hold with what they were planning, But it didn't matter. I had no choice but to stand with them, which meant I could not stand by her side. Whew! Bam! That took me there. The idea of not being able to stand by your loved one's side, to me, is very powerful. The fact that he is not able to do this for some reason makes me want to find out, wait a minute, why? Why can't you be there for her? What's going on here? It also clues me in that this is a romance story, and since it's a dark council preventing him from being with his lady, it sounds like it's a paranormal romance. This opening definitely piqued my interest, and it hit an emotional chord which I am perfectly alright with feeling at the beginning of a book, and it definitely made me want to read on. Nice work. In fourth place, we have Ebonys Legacy, Year 4, Legacy Academy Book 8 by M. Gaida. Mated. Gunnar was mine. Finally. It was a day I had anticipated eagerly for months, having waited so long to claim him, and for him to claim me. Gunnar had taken my virginity less than an hour ago. We hadn't had time to indulge in prolonged lovemaking. My skin was chafed from his kisses, and the juncture between my legs still throbbed. I should be jumping up and down for joy, but it was a false happy ever after, and we both knew it. War loomed ahead of us like a dark black cloud, overshadowing everything, spoiling our happiness. It was going to be the final battle between good and evil. This opening line really hit the spot for me. For one thing, we can definitely tell that it's a romance novel, and a steamy one at that. We can definitely tell that it's a paranormal romance because the very first word, bam, mated. Okay, mates are a thing here. I liked the sexual tension at play, as well as the sense that they were nowhere near out of the woods yet. There's trouble brewing on the horizon, and somehow they're gonna have to stand together and fight it. I would definitely read on with this book. Nice work. Alright, we're getting down toward the bottom of the list. Coming in at number 3, we have Hunt the Night, Supernatural Legacy 1, Angel and Dragon Shifters. My black wings drag across the damp stone floor, scraping back and forth as I prowl inside my cell. With every step I take, the chain shackled to my left ankle clatters, and my lank black hair falls farther across my face. I can smell the serene commander even before her footsteps sound on the staircase opposite my cage. Her scent is as pure as a crisp winter's day when the air is unburdened by the perfume of flowers. As her name implies, she is faultless. She possesses the kind of purity I certainly don't have. I really loved that this line had a bit of poetry to it. I've read a lot of these opening lines now, and I don't want to insult my fellow paranormal romance authors, but one thing that I really wish that more paranormal romance books had was a sense of poetry to the language. I liked the descriptions here. I liked, her scent is as pure as a crisp winter's day when the air is unburdened by the perfume of flowers. Boom. Love it. I love it. That's so good. I love descriptions like that. I'm a sucker for a good description, and this one just had me. I also like the fact that she's also chained up in a cell and apparently has wings. That's intriguing. And it's also clear that she has enemies if she's chained up, so there's definitely suspense in the offing. This opening hit all the notes that I would expect a competent opening to hit, and for that reason, it came in at number 3 on my list of the top 10 best opening lines in paranormal romance this February. And in second place, we have My Fiery Valentine, Dark King's Book 23 by Donna Grant. V opened his eyes to see the sun breaking over the mountains through his window. A smile immediately pulled at his lips. All the worries that had once weighed heavily upon him were gone. He turned his head and looked at his mate. Claire was curled on her side, facing him, one hand under her cheek and the other tucked against her. Her blonde hair was spread out behind her against the deep gray sheets. His heart swelled as he stared at her. She slept peacefully with her lips parted slightly. It still boggled his mind that such a woman could love him. Claire was everything to him, and he made sure that she knew it every day. He wanted to touch her face and feel the soft skin beneath his fingers, but he was loath to wake her. A dragon king might not need sleep, but humans did. Loved it. Definitely a romance novel. Definitely a paranormal romance novel. I really like the descriptions here, and I like how this opening concentrated a lot on romance and love and devotion as an opening rather than the fear of death necessarily. And don't get me wrong, I don't mind openings that begin by instilling a sense of fear in the reader. That's perfectly alright with me. I enjoy suspense. But I also love it when a book jumps right on in with the romance and just lets you know right away that, yep, here comes a love story. You're in for it. It was nicely descriptive. I like the fact that he, in a sense, is much stronger than her because he's the Dragon King and he doesn't need sleep or anything, but he still isn't going to wake her, and he clearly cares about protecting her. I'm a sucker for it. I can't help it. So this one comes in at number 2 for me. And at last, coming in first place for the top 10 best paranormal romance lines in books coming out this February, we have Fire Maidens, Switzerland, Billionaires and Bodyguards, Book 9 by Anna Lowe. It wasn't often that Claudia woke in the arms of a stranger in an unfamiliar room, but every once in a while, when the moon was full and her shifter side heated up, she cracked her eyes open, then closed them, waiting for regret to set in. But it didn't. It couldn't, not as long as she snuggled in that man's warm embrace. And, heck, why not allow herself to snooze for a while, to pretend she was just an ordinary young woman doing a fairly ordinary thing, like sleeping in after a sizzling night with a perfect stranger. I liked this opening line because it immediately gave us a sense of who the main character was. It was genre specific. We knew right away that this was definitely a paranormal romance because of the mention of the moon. And while I did enjoy the prose of some of the prior opening lines a bit more, I think that this one puts forward a female lead that people are more readily able to relate to than perhaps the other excerpts did. So for that reason, this opening line came in first place for the best opening lines this month for me. So much for the best opening lines of February 2022. Now how about the worst opening lines? Once again, before we begin, if you happen to have found the opening of your book on this list, please don't take it to heart. This list is compiled according to my own opinions and my own personal judgments, and you have nothing to be ashamed of if for some reason I personally did not like your opening line. I hope that you keep writing, and I hope that you keep trying to do your best every day to put your books out into the world. Coming in at number 10 on my list of the top 10 worst opening lines for paranormal romance this February 2022, we have His Brother's Mate, a Black River Pack novel, Book 1 by Clara Blaines. Gregory Wolvenson was trotting through the blue-gray fog, slipping from lamppost to lamppost, watching the shadows for anything that out of the ordinary. The rogues had been active lately and not covering their tracks very well, so between trying to figure out what they were up to and covering their messes, Gregory and his pack were exhausted. His white wolf barely made a sound as he approached the shoreline of Lake Ontario. Here in the dream realm it was silent. He could easily follow his nose without fear of being jumped, stepping on the cool sand and hearing the water lap quietly at the shoreline. He followed the scent of an unknown wolf to a grouping of large rocks. Golden eyes alert to an ambush, he approached carefully. As I read this opening line out loud, I stumbled several times because there was hardly any punctuation. Now, I'm willing to overlook some punctuation errors if the opening line really grips me. However, it does put me on my guard because I have to ask myself, okay, if there are so many errors up front on this very first page, how well does this bode for the rest of the story? Has an editor touched this? Has anyone else read this other than the author? I do think that this opening has potential. It's mysterious, it's moody. I like the fog. I like that there's the possibility of danger in the air. I liked some of the details, like the cool water lapping on the shore. It's just that there were so many errors that made this opening difficult to read that I had to dock at some points. Coming in ninth place, we have Dragon's Bite, Dragons Want Curves by C.C. Sapphire. I stood in the middle of the woods, about 100 yards from our cabin, when I opened the portal to New York City. I stepped through the portal into a wind tunnel of an alley somewhere near the Port Authority. The edges of the portal sizzled and shimmered, then closed. I shivered. Plumes of steam shot up through the sewer grates. As I set my bag down to button my coat, some greasy slime ball in a leather jacket smiled at me. He looked like a stock character from an 80s action movie, with thinning, slicked-back hair and a sour smile. Now, I liked the descriptions a little bit here. We have plumes of steam shooting up through sewer grates, stock character from an 80s action movie with thinning, slicked-back hair and a sour smile. What took me out of this opening a little bit was the fact that I didn't really have a sense of what was going on exactly. And I realized that I'm only on the first page, so, I would have to give it a little more time to get the full picture. But I know that she's in the middle of the woods, 100 yards from our cabin. Okay, so whoever our is. She could apparently open portals. She apparently opened it to New York City. Now she's suddenly in New York City. So I guess we can just forget about the cabin in the woods then, because it's no longer relevant. Why open on it then? Apparently there's a greasy dude in a leather jacket smiling at her, so are portals a normal everyday occurrence in this world? Is he someone who happens to know who she is? I mean, there was just so many questions that were raised, and some details, like starting in a cabin in the woods and then just immediately going to New York City, that just kind of felt like, okay, maybe this story isn't starting in the right place. It has potential. I enjoyed some of the descriptions. I just feel like developmentally it needed a bit more work. And in 8th place, we have The Alpha's Scarred Omega, The Renegade Alpha Pack, Book 2, by Carol Dawn. The smell of smoke pulls me from a beach-filled dream. At first, I ignore the scent and try to fall back to sleep. My brother and his friends are most likely having a bonfire outside. It is summer break from school, after all. I'll be a senior next year, but my brother and his buddies just graduated yesterday. Well, my stepbrother. My mom married my stepdad when I was just a baby. He came with my annoying brother. I smile, knowing full well that I love him to the moon and back. Annoying as he can be, he's still the best big brother a girl could ask for. I think this is another instance where some of the details were good. I liked the smell of the smoke pulling her from a beach-filled dream. I liked the sensory details. I do wish that this opening hadn't immediately gone into backstory about her family and her stepbrother and their relationship. We're not yet grounded in the story, so it's just too early to throw background information at your audience, in my opinion. The same thing about the fact that she'll be a senior next year, that her brother graduated the year before, the history of her step-parents, or her mother and her stepfather. It's just too early. I think these details would be best saved for later, and instead focusing the opening on really placing your reader into the scene at hand, making them understand the stakes, whatever the stakes may be. Save the graduation details and step-family details for another time. Alright, coming in at number 7, we have Sirens Sin, an erotic tale of mermaid lust and deception, by Audrey Rain. I fantasized often. I felt caught in the bubble and divided by desires. I felt burdened by a false sense of duty, and I felt like I was drowning day in and day out. I needed that magical solution to fall in my lap, and it did, just not how I expected it to. For 2 years, I took my anger out on a girlfriend that I barely cared about, but every time I made her cry, she came back. For some reason, we kept the ridiculous wheel turning. I avoided my family. I went to the bar religiously after work, and I argued with every idiot that thought he had half a notion about anything. My life was an endless cycle of work, sleep, and drink. Sounds like a really nice person. Yeah, I hate to say it, but this protagonist just kind of came off like a dick. I hate to be that way, but I didn't come away from this excerpt feeling like this is a person I really want to spend a lot of time with, even in a fictional context. Then there was also the fact that the style, as of yet, seemed a bit repetitive, with sentences that kind of started the same way and ended the same way. I fantasized often. I felt caught in the bubble. I felt like I was drowning day in and day out. A lot of filter words, too. It sounds like this character has the potential to be developed, and I like that they aren't perfect and they clearly aren't a Mary Sue archetype. That's something, at least. I just didn't really feel like I wanted to spend any more time with them than this first page. In sixth, we have The Snake's Temptation, a Shapeshifter Romance by Celia Stiles. Mom, you here? It was a dumb question. She knew her mother was here. She could smell the food cooking a mile away. She made her way down the hallway to where the kitchen sat. Just as she rounded the corner, she saw her mother standing with her back towards her daughter and looking out through the window. As if knowing she was here, her mother turned to look her way. Oh, Stacy, I didn't see you. Actually, I didn't even know you were here. I think you are getting quieter each day. How are you, dear? She leaned over to kiss her daughter's cheek. Aside from the obvious punctuation errors, such as the missing comma in daughter's cheek because that should be possessive, this story didn't really open in a way that caught my attention or built any suspense. I also am not aware what genre this book is, based upon reading this opening page. I didn't see any romance. I didn't really see any sign of anything paranormal going on. In fact, the narrator sounds like they're a child, because they're calling out to their mom, and their manner of speaking seems to be a little bit simple. There were also some rather awkwardly phrased sentences here, like where the kitchen sat. A kitchen doesn't really sit. Things like that. It distracted me from the story, and I think this opening line could be improved by maybe focusing on a part of the story that is more relevant to the actual details of the plot, perhaps. It has potential, it's just not there yet. Alright, coming in at number 5, we have The Alpha's Baby, Werebear, Shifter, and Pregnancy Romance by Jackie Tanner. Zola, yelled my mom from somewhere in the house. I could hear her shuffling about, getting ready for work. My mom, Lydia Hamilton, is an elementary school teacher for kindergartners. She loves her job and is always eager to get to work. How she likes it is beyond me. I mean, I love kids too. Just having to wake up extremely early is just so not my thing. What? I yell back groggily, rubbing at the sleepiness in my eyes. Get your butt out of bed and get ready for school, Mom yelled back. So here we have another opening which starts in a very similar way to the last opening. Someone is getting up and interacting with their mom in some way. Someone who appears to be, at the very least, a teenager or younger. It appears that the main character, I can only assume named Zola, has a rather tumultuous relationship with their mother, which is why they're talking to each other in such tense tones, perhaps? Who knows? We don't know yet. It's only the first page. But unfortunately, this opening page dumps backstory onto the reader. We don't really need to know that their mom is an elementary school teacher and that they don't like getting up early and all the other stuff. And we don't really have any indication that this book is a paranormal romance yet. We also don't have an indication of what sort of problem is going on or what the plot is going to be about. This story, I think, would also benefit from starting in a different place. The potential for character development is there, but I just don't think that this opening is serving the story. At least from what I can see based on the first page. Coming in at number 4, we have Dangerous Relation, a secret werewolf mate love romance, To Love an Alpha, Book 1, by Calliope Hidalgo. Vita couldn't move. What could she say about how she felt at that moment? It hurt. You know that kind of pain where it feels like someone stabbed your chest several times, but you couldn't do anything about it other than to accept it? That's exactly how she felt. Let's give a round of applause for the future couple, the MC announced, followed by a wave of cheers when Derek and Zara kissed. Vita touched her chest, closing her eyes as she took slow, deep breaths. Derek was the man she had been in love with ever since she was young. Her parents died while protecting his family, causing her to be adopted by the Joe family. You know what inspires confidence? When there's a typo right on the cover. I know this isn't a cover critique, but still, come on, please make sure there aren't typos on your cover. Like, come on, I'm not asking for the moon, man. There were parts of this opening line that I liked. There was tension, there was heartache. We get a glimpse of what the character is going through, but the execution of this opening line threw me off a bit. For one thing, there was a lot of filter words, lots of felt going on, and then there wasn't really any subtext. Like, we can figure out, based on what's going on, that this chick is in love with Derek. There really wasn't a need to just kind of explain that. I also found it rather difficult to read out loud, and I kept stumbling over and over again because these sentences themselves were kind of clumsily put together, in my opinion. It needs some smoothing out, but it's on its way to being a competent hook for a story. And we're down to the final 3. Can you believe it? Let's go. Let's do this. Coming in third place, we have Alpha's Rejected Bride, Alpha Masters Book 2 by Crystal Fox. Chicago is a lot bigger than you expected. After driving through the city, Keith parks the rental car in an empty parking garage, not wanting to draw attention to yourselves. The streets are bustling with people, many of whom are dressed very differently than the normal attire of your close-knit wooded hometown. Men and women are walking around wearing leather jackets and jeans. Others are wearing business suits and ties. All of them seem to be moving quickly and purposefully. You glance over at Keith and notice that he's staring intently at the people passing by. "What are you looking at?" you ask him curiously. "Nothing," he frowns. "Just people." "Is something wrong?" you ask him worriedly. "No," he shakes his head. "I just never realized how different humans can be." The first thing that I noticed here is that this opening is in second person, which is interesting. I don't usually see paranormal romance books in the second person, so that was an interesting twist. It's fine, although admittedly I'm not used to reading it, so it did take me a minute to kind of put myself in that frame of mind. I like that the characters of this story seem slightly aloof. It makes me wonder, okay, why don't they seem to fit in? What is so different about humans from everybody else? Compared to whom? The thing is this had yet another passage of just info dumping about Chicago. I can't stress this enough. Save the information for just even a little while later. Taking a moment to get people grounded into the scene that you're trying to create really is a worthwhile endeavor. This opening just focused too much on setting and talking about how Chicago is bigger than you expect, instead of developing the characters. So for that reason, it's coming in toward the bottom of the list for me. Coming in at number 2, we have It Started With a Kiss, Vampire Romance Story by Esther Austin. There was not much which went on in this sleepy backwater of a town. Only a couple of miles away from the lights of the big city, these were worlds apart. By their early 20s, anyone with drive or ambition had followed the lure of that path of gold, and those left, well, suffice to say, they followed a certain stereotype. You either loved the laid-back lifestyle, eking out a living in whatever way you could, or you moved on, and most moved on. Whether it was work, life, or love, it was always the same. You either accepted what was on offer, or you went in search of better. I don't want backstory right in the opening line, please. Once again, save the backstory and exposition on the setting for later. There's plenty of time to talk about the backstory of the podunk town that you're from later. Aside from some grammatical and punctuation problems, I do think that this writing style is competent, but it just started out on a rather dull foot for me. I don't like info dumping openings, I gotta tell you. It is an instant source of frustration for me. So, for that reason, this one's coming in at number 2. And finally, coming in at number 1 on my list of the top 10 worst paranormal romance opening lines released in February of 2022, we have Caged Beast, a bad boy bear shifter MMA romance by Evelyn J. Knight. It was an easy, carefree day for Danielle. She was on her summer break before going back for her final year at college. She was enjoying the freedom, but didn't know what to do with it yet. There was a whole summer in front of her, and it already felt empty and lackluster to her. She left her apartment to the sounds of birds chirping and a soft, subtle breeze that blew through her silky, dark brown hair, pushing the scent of her lilac shampoo into her own nose. She smiled as she smelled it, and the familiarity of it soothed her as she made her way downtown to meet up with her friends. Now, perhaps it was a bit harsh of me to put this opening line as the number one worst line out of all of the ones that I could have chosen here. There are a couple grammatical nitpicks, as well as punctuation nitpicks. There's a spacing issue going on with that, with that first paragraph, that random period just out in the middle of the open there. Okay. But what got me about this was that, one, it's not genre specific. Two, it doesn't open with any sort of suspense. It was an easy, carefree day. Oh, well, now I'm really on the edge of my seat. And then we kind of have a juxtaposition of two rather different moods. The first paragraph tells us that she was enjoying her newfound freedom, but she didn't know what to do with it yet, and it already felt empty and lackluster to her. But in the next paragraph, she seems to be in much finer spirits. The birds are chirping, there's a soft breeze, she's going to see her friends, she's enjoying the smell of her own lilac shampoo. Its familiarity soothes her, so maybe that's showing that her mood is changing because of all this happiness around her. But I don't really know that you need to be soothed from the feeling of summer being lackluster and empty. I don't know. Maybe I'm nitpicking here. I think this story would be better served if it started a little bit later, perhaps more close to an important plot point, because we don't really need a scene where the character is walking down the road having an easy, carefree day. And of course, clean up the punctuation and grammatical errors, tighten up some of the language. This is definitely a fixable opening line, and I like that the author took care to put sensory details in there. There's definitely potential here. It just still has a little bit of a ways to go. That's all. So there you have it, the top 10 best and the top 10 worst paranormal romance opening lines for February 2022. Thank you so much for listening to me. And now, I would like to listen to you. What was your favorite opening line? Or even your least favorite opening line? Do you agree with my ranking? Or do you think I should have swapped a few around a bit? Please feel free to drop a line below and let me know how you feel, because I love hearing back from you guys. If you enjoy my work and would like to support it, please remember to like this video, comment below, subscribe to my channel, and ring that bell. I post new videos every Wednesday, and I would love it if you would come along with me on my journey to make my writing dreams a reality. I'll see you in my next video. Take care.